What is going on, TFA Fam? Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're happy. Hope you're healthy. Hope everything is going well in your lives. It's time to come at you guys with another TFA Throwdown. Tonight, me and Kev are going to be talking about two high-end wide receiver twos in Cooper Kupp and Calvin Ridley. According to 4for4's ADP, Cooper Kupp is wide receiver 14 coming off boards at the beginning of the fourth, and Calvin Ridley is wide receiver 16 going at 406, and they are separated by Juju Smith-Schuster at wide receiver 15. So we're just going to jump right into this. Kev, I'm going to give you the floor first. Tell me why you are taking Cooper Kupp over one Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I think that being a little undervalued overall of what his ceiling is, I think, because right now he's going in the fourth round, 407, wide receiver 14. He is starting to move up a little bit compared to where he was going, because earlier in the offseason, he was kind of like wide receiver 20-ish. Now he's kind of starting to move up a little bit, and I think that's rightfully so. Basically, people's disdain for him or lack of trust in him really predicates it on what happened over the last 5 weeks of the season when they went to more 12 personnel. But if you look overall, he's 16.9 fantasy points per game, or 9th in the league. He had 16 red zone receptions, which was third. He ended up with 94 receptions, 1,162 yards, 10 touchdowns. Accounted for 22% of the targets out of that wide receiver core between him and Robert Woods. 134 targets, averaged about 8.4 per game. And he had an 80.5% snap share, and he had 65% of the snaps from the slot. So, I say all this to say this. I feel like most people's disdain for him and dislike for him is what happened over the final 5 weeks of the season, where he did fall off a little bit, because weeks 1 through 13, Cooper Kupp was wide receiver 6 over that time span. Some things happened last year. Obviously, that offensive line certainly took a step back, and the team didn't make the playoffs. But Jared Goff did take a step back last year. He posted lows in yards per pass attempt and touchdown rate, basically since his rookie year. And then, when you look at Goff in 2019, his play action was 32.8% of his passes, which trailed only Lamar Jackson at 34.8%. So there's some other things to kind of look at. The volume was not warranted, as Goff ranked 22nd in completion rate, 13th in yards per attempt, and 26th in quarterback rating. So like I said, and then with Cooper Kupp, he started the year hot. He was wide receiver 6 through that span. He had 58 receptions, 792 yards, and 5 touchdowns, averaged 13.7 yards per catch, and 2.36 yards per route over that span. Now everything started to fall out basically once they did that, once they switched to 12 personnel. Essentially over Sean McVay's history as a head coach, that is something he's never really done. If you go back and look last year, they used 12 personnel in week 11. The Rams used 12 personnel on 32 of their offensive plays, which was 76% of the snaps. Up until that point of the season, the Rams were primarily an offense that were 3 wide receiver sets, running just 58 total plays from 12 personnel, or 12%, through the first 10 weeks of the season. So I think some of that had to do with the fact that their offensive line was struggling so much, and I think they were trying to change things up a little bit, trying to obviously get that final playoff spot, because they were in a push for the playoffs. Now, having the entire offseason, I do not think this is going to be a trend that we're going to see through all of this year, and I think that's what some people believe, and that's why people are lower on Cooper Kupp this year, and I think that is a big mistake. We know Cooper Kupp is one of 2 in this offense with him and Robert Woods, who is going to see a heavy target share in this offense. He is likely going to see the same amount of targets in about that 130, 140 range. He gets a lot of those primary slot snaps at 65% in the slot. So there's a lot to like here with Cooper Kupp, and I think wide receiver 14, 407 for a guy who has top 5 upside, I think is a little egregious. Now, my issue mainly with Calvin Ridley is this. Calvin Ridley, one, is terrible at yards after the catch. Absolutely horrific. I think he was 72nd last year in yards after the catch. Cooper Kupp was 4th in the league in yards after catch with 525, right? That is a problem for me, because I don't see how we can truly believe that he is going to take this massive step forward, because last year the Falcons were number 1 in pass attempts per play. The Falcons were, and he still only acquired 17% of the targets. Where's the extra targets going to come from for him, right? Because now they've added Todd Gurley, who is a better pass-catching back than Devonta Freeman. And Devonta Freeman was hurt last year, in and out of the lineup. They had to have some other things. If Todd Gurley stays healthy, they brought in Hayden Hurst. And so I have a problem somewhat like at first, like I was super on board the Calvin Ridley train, and the more I've kind of looked into Calvin Ridley, the more I'm a little bit more hesitant because he's not this explosive playmaker who can go out there and turn a 10-yard route into in house call. Like that's not really his game, and so he is predicated off targets, and that's why yes, he finished I think at 15th in fantasy points per game last year, but unless you're expecting this massive bump in targets, and really I don't know where those targets are going to come from. Yes, Mohamed Sanu is gone from that offense, but we saw Russell Gage kind of step up in the second half of the season, and other than that, they brought in Todd Gurley. I don't know what else is going to happen here to really change this. And like I said, they were already number one in pass plays per game last year. So it's not like you say, okay, I think there's a higher ceiling there. So that's my only issue with him. I think he is a fine wide receiver too if you can get him there. But he does not have Cooper Kupp ceiling. I do not think that he should be going as a lot of people have him ranked as a wide receiver 1. I think that's a little bit too rich for me. I have him at wide receiver 17. I think that's a little bit more fair. But I think if the hype train continues, I think he's just going to keep rising a little bit more. Right now, he's going at wide receiver 16, 502, which I think is fine. If you can get him there, great. Like, take him there all day. I'm fine with that. It's right around where I have him. But if he goes any further than that, starts rising up and goes past a guy like Cooper Kupp and a couple of these other guys, I'm out.
Yeah, you were mentioning where are the targets going to come from. You mentioned Sanu not being there, but there are 209 targets available between Austin Hooper, Mohamed Sanu, and Devonta Freeman. Devonta Freeman had 70 targets last year. Even if you want to quote-unquote give those to Todd Gurley, because Gurley had, at his peak, he had 80 back-to-back years, 2 and 3 seasons ago, I believe it was. So even if you want to give those quote-unquote targets to Gurley, that still leaves 130 up in the air. You mentioned that the Falcons were first in pass plays per game. I don't really see that dropping off too far from there anyway, because Matt Ryan in the past 5 years, he's been top 5 in pass attempts in 3 of those, and top 10 in pass attempts in 4 of the last 5 years. If you're a fan of looking at strength of schedule metrics, Sharp Football Stats has the Falcons with the most difficult schedule going into 2020, looking at Vegas win totals for their opponents. So that pass volume isn't going anywhere. We've talked about this in previous episodes with the division that they play in, how it's going to be a tough division. So it's like all this, there's just going to be volume going around. And after Julio and Ridley, it really drops off. I know we like Russell Gage as a late round guy, as a potential sleeper, but he's not on the level of Julio and Calvin Ridley. So those targets are going to be super concentrated. And then the guys that they brought in with this offseason, who knows how any of this is going to go. So they're going to have to work in Hayden Hurst and Todd Gurley. So I think it's just going to be super concentrated with the targets. I mean, Ridley has produced back-to-back wide receiver 2 seasons while missing a couple of games both seasons, and he had less than 100 targets in both of those years. With the games that he was active in last year through week 14, he would have been wide receiver 14. If you look at what his numbers were after the Mohamed Sanu trade, I think it was like week 8, I believe. He was wide receiver 11 during that time. He was tied with Kenny Galladay at 9th in points per game. So I think it just absolutely wheels up for Ridley and this entire offense, to be quite honest. I have Ridley and Julio obviously both as top 10 wide receivers for 2020. My biggest thing with Cooper Kupp, and I agree that whole offense, I think, is being undervalued and being slept on a little bit. I just don't know how it's going to pan out and what, we haven't really seen McVay have to change anything up yet. He did it toward the end of the year last year, but he came in as being the 3 wide receiver, 11 personnel god, just running that on 98% of his plays. And now it doesn't seem like that's going to work. So are they going to go 12 personnel? I mean, you could say the same thing for the targets being concentrated for the Rams as well. After Kupp and Woods, I mean, you have the tight ends, but their wide receiver room after that is pretty thin as well. But I honestly don't think you can go wrong with either of these guys. But I am here for the Calvin Ridley train. We were both riding together. You kind of tipped your hat and said this is where I I got to get off it if this stop is going to be, a little too far for me. But I think it just absolutely wheels up for Calvin Ridley. As long as he can stay healthy, there's no reason to think that he shouldn't be in that 120, 130 target range. Like I said, he's had like 92, 95 the past 2 years. So with the way that this entire offense is setting up, I want Calvin Ridley in this situation. And that's all I got to say about that, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just end on this, at least the last part that I have to say about this is that, one, yes, I do agree that, like, I do like Calvin Ridley. Like, this isn't like I hate Calvin Ridley. Like, I'm off that, and I'm, like,
Why do you
selling
hate Calvin Ridley?
I think there's a certain point that we get to that we need to start, okay, let's take a look at this, because most of the time it's like, okay, I can project, a little bit more positive progression, right? But they're already at the peak. Now, do I think that they're going to have, like, all of a sudden drop off and, like, they're going to drop to, like, 8th in the league in pass attempts? No. This defense is still pretty bad. They went out and retooled it through the draft, but this defense is still going to be really bad this year. They're still going to have to throw the ball a ton. They're still one of the best divisions. Like, all those things are true, but for every vacated target, they went out and retooled that, right? They brought in Todd Gurley, who arguably is a better running back at this point of his career than what Devonta Freeman was. I know that he's dealing with the knee injury and everything, or the knee stuff, and that's always going to be like a black cloud over him. But he still played most every game last year. He's still a capable pass catcher. That might be a better role from him, and lower some of those touches a little bit in terms of the running, the RB carries, but get him more involved in the passing game because he is still dynamic in the passing game and can be utilized that way. They brought in Hayden Hurst. There's the hype train for Hayden Hurst. So I do think that it's definitely a possibility that Calvin Ridley could end up at 110 targets, something in that range. But so I don't hate Calvin Ridley. I think he is great. If you can get him in that 5th round, maybe early 4th, I'd probably be okay with it. But if he starts going further up than that, that's when probably I would be out, because I just think that there are other players in that range once you start getting into that spot that I would just rather have than him. So, like I said, with Cooper Kupp, I think Cooper Kupp is being criminally undervalued right now. I still think wide receiver 14 is too low. He should be going as a wide receiver 1. He was wide receiver 6 through the first 13 weeks of the season last year. He soured people a little bit because of what happened during the fantasy playoffs. I think that's a little bit ridiculous to take everything that Sean McVay's done for the first 2 years he's been with the Rams to all of a sudden now the last 5 weeks, and it's like, okay, that's what they are now. That's what they're going to do. They're not going to be a 3 wide receiver, set anymore. Now it's all 12 personnel. Sorry, Cooper, you're fucked because you're not going to be running for the routes from the slot anymore. Like, no, that's fucking ridiculous. They've had all offseason to figure this thing out. I think they're going to go back to that. They still have Josh Reynolds. They brought in Van Jefferson into this offense. And so I think that there's going to be enough there for them. Yes, I do like Gerald Everett. I think Gerald Everett is probably being undervalued as well. I think he could end up being maybe the better pass catcher of the two between him and Tyler Higbee. But overall, I just think there's a ton of targets to go here for Cooper Kupp. And not to mention the fact that Jared Goff was absolutely horrific last year for most of the year last year. I think he bounces back. If he does, that's only better for Cooper Kupp, who still had 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns, and despite playing in one of the worst one of the poor offenses in the league. So I just think it's wheels up again for Cooper Kupp, and I think he easily finishes a wide receiver 1. And for me, that's why I think he's being undervalued, and that's why I'd rather have him over Calvin.
YouTube, do your thing. Drop a comment in here. If you are not yet subscribed, please do so. We see you guys watching. We see the views, but the subscribers aren't going up. I don't know what's up with that. I don't know if you're just doing it because you'd rather just type in the Fantasy Authority in your search bar, but just subscribe. Make life easier on all of us. We appreciate you guys. Like this video, let us know who you think won, and then also you can let us know if there are any decisions that you've been coming across in your mock drafts that you want to see us battle it out. Thank you guys, and we will talk to you soon.